Have you ever wondered what happens when a place remembers? Not in history books or faded photographs, but in its very soil, in the stone, in the air that clings to it like a second skin. Tonight, we journey to Okinawa, not just a tropical paradise, but a battlefield soaked with unimaginable violence. Here, the ground itself seems to breathe with memory, and the dead are said to walk among the living. One gate of a Marine Corps base became so haunted, so unbearable, that soldiers refused to man their posts, and the military had no choice but to abandon it. This is the story of Gate 3 at Camp Hansen, a place where the war never ended. If you're drawn to true accounts of the unexplained, subscribe now, because once we step through this gate together, there is no turning back. It was April 1st, 1945, Easter Sunday. Operation Iceberg began with more than 180,000 American troops storming the beaches of Okinawa, supported by 1,400 ships. Yet the beaches were strangely silent. The Japanese were not waiting with machine guns and artillery. They had withdrawn, burrowed into the limestone caves of the island, creating an underground fortress that turned Okinawa into a trap. For 82 relentless days, the island burned. They called it the Typhoon of Steel. Over 12,000 Americans were killed. More than 100,000 Japanese soldiers perished. And perhaps most haunting, between 100,000 and 150,000 civilians died, many by suicide, convinced by propaganda that capture meant torture. Families jumped from cliffs. Mothers smothered their children. In those caves, entire bloodlines ended in silence. Shiga Nakahodo, a child survivor, later recollected, "We encountered a hell on earth. We saw dead bodies, crying and screaming people, and a person who was begging to be shot to death." Another witness described seeing a young man speak in Okinawan dialect about surrender, only to have Japanese soldiers jump out from behind the rocks, condemn him as spy, and cut off his head with a sword. And here is the chilling truth. Even today, bones are still discovered. Archaeologists, hikers, and construction workers stumble upon skulls and fragments of skeletons, as if the island refuses to let the war be forgotten. The stone remembers, the dead remember, and some still walk. After the war, America built bases on Okinawa, and Camp Hansen rose on ground soaked in blood. With over 6,000 Marines stationed there, it became a hub of activity. Multiple gates stood as entry points, guarded day and night. But one gate, Gate 3, would earn a reputation no Marine wanted. At first, it was whispered about in barracks. Marines spoke of strange encounters on the night shift, dismissed by officers as nerves or exhaustion. Yet the stories multiplied. Different men, different times, but the same account. They spoke of a figure dressed as a World War II-era Marine, bloodied and wounded, who would come up to the guardhouse and ask for a light for a cigarette. Once someone gives him a light, he vanishes. This reportedly happened every weekend. In that instant, the Marine would flick his lighter, the flame revealing a young man's face, wounded, tired, eyes filled with something beyond this world. And then, as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. The night swallowed him whole, leaving nothing but the faint smell of tobacco and the unnerving silence of an empty post. It wasn't one man's story. It happened again and again and again. How do you dismiss dozens of witnesses, all describing the exact same figure, the exact same words, the exact same vanishing act? And then there were the patrols. Marines reported entire groups of Imperial Japanese soldiers marching in formation past the gate. The haunting happened so often that Marine guards began to refuse to stand guard at Gate 3, and the entry control point was eventually closed. Silent, precise, disciplined, as though they were still defending their homeland. They carried rifles. Their boots struck the ground in rhythm. Their eyes never broke from the mission. Imagine being a 19-year-old guard, armed and trained, but frozen in terror as the ghosts of another era march past you, ignoring your existence, trapped in a loop of unfinished duty. Witnesses said they could hear commands shouted in Japanese. Some swore they felt the vibrations of boots on the earth. The war for them had not ended. It continued in the spectral realm, and Gate 3 was their post. As time passed, the phenomena escalated. Marines heard breathing behind them when no one was there, the metallic click of weapons being readied, the stench of gunpowder filling the humid night air. Sudden drops in temperature so sharp that soldiers layered themselves with jackets in the tropics. The fear grew so great that men began refusing orders. They would not guard Gate 3. It spread until the base itself faced an unthinkable reality. The bravest military in the world could not hold this gate. And so, Camp Hansen made an unprecedented decision. Gate 3 was permanently closed. Officially, it was called routine, but the truth lingered in the barracks. The Marines had surrendered the gate, not to living enemies, but to the dead. But here is the most terrifying part. Closing the gate did not end the haunting. Even now, those who approach the abandoned site report the same apparitions. The young Marine still asks for a light. The Japanese patrols still march past in silence. The ghosts still keep their eternal watch. The question is, why here? Why this gate? The answer lies in Okinawa itself. This island has been called the most haunted location in the US military. Building 283 at Kadena Air Base became infamous after multiple murders and suicides, so plagued that it was demolished in 2009. It was said that an Air Force officer murdered his entire family there before killing himself sometime in the 1970s. The next military family to move into the house experienced feelings of unrest and paranoia until the father of the family stabbed everyone. Author Jane Hitchcock wrote about the residents in her 1995 book, The Ghosts of Okinawa. From her research, Hitchcock determined the most frequently heard and most horrifying story is of the teenage girl who was stabbed to death by her stepfather. They were the last family to live in the house. After the murder, it was boarded up before being used as storage. Passers-by reported hearing sounds of children crying, strange laughter, and, in one instance, a report of a woman washing her hair in the abandoned house's sink. There has also supposedly been a sighting of a samurai warrior who rides his steed through the living room. Maeda Point, a popular diving area, is haunted by figures that swim alongside divers, phantoms of those who jumped to their deaths from cliffs above. During Wo Ti, this cave had been the site of a Japanese field hospital. The story that is often told is that during the war, 17 nurses had committed suicide in the cave. Many Okinawans refused to even get close to the cave itself, and especially the entrance, which has long since been sealed shut. Legend has it that Maeda Point is inhabited by the spirit of an old man who only walks about near a tomb on the water's edge. Reports say that those who see the elderly Okinawan know there will be a body washing ashore in the coming days. Scuba divers even report seeing ghosts underwater. A golf course now sits atop the site of a wartime hospital where 17 nurses ended their lives as American forces advanced. Golfers and workers still hear cries late at night, carried by the wind. Everywhere on Okinawa, death lingers, refusing to release its grip. What makes the Gate 3 story particularly compelling is not just the consistency of the reports, but their documentation by military personnel and researchers. Jane A. Hitchcock's The Ghosts of Okinawa celebrates the local haunts. Security cameras have actually captured something at Gate 3. April Marling, director of Kadena's Information Tickets and Travel Office, recalled one frightening moment 2 years ago while she was giving the annual Spooky Sites tour. Suddenly, the phone started ringing in the house, Marling said. Everybody darted for the bus, she added. Nobody orchestrated the phone call to enhance the effect of a Halloween scare tour, Marling said. As far as she knew, there shouldn't have been a phone line connected to an uninhabited house. Another group visiting the house in the mid-1990s had a similar experience, said Jerry Johnson, a former tour director for Kadena's United Services organization. As the tour guide began speaking, a curtain parted in front of all of them, said Johnson. That was enough to break up the tour for the evening. Author Jane A. Hitchcock lived on Okinawa between 1992 and 1995, where she wrote 5 books about her time on the island. She documented the history, folklore, and, of course, ghost stories that seem to permeate the entire countryside. In 2018, she published the 5th edition of her book, The Ghosts of Okinawa, an updated edition with even more stories. The hauntings continue today. Looking through any article, found, post-yard or video about Kadena Air Base with a comment section, and seeing just how many people are sharing their own experiences, and overwhelmingly affirming that these ghost stories aren't just tall tales. Okinawa's Maeda Point may have some of the world's best snorkeling sites, but American males are warned to avoid walking around alone during the night. Even walking with another male can be problematic. Hitchcock cites numerous reports of U.S. men being harassed in the night by spectral women. The women are dressed in World War II-era Okinawan garb and are so consumed with anger and hatred of evil American troops that the ghosts will attack them and try to throw men off the cliffs. During Hitchcock's time hunting ghosts on Okinawa, she was asked by a family living in a third-floor apartment in Kadena Towers to investigate their home. They reported cold spots, strange movements, and even things being thrown at their children during prayers. The last straw came when one of the parents found their daughter having a conversation with an invisible child who had walked through the wall. So what is happening here? Are these restless spirits unable to move on, their trauma chaining them to this world? Or is it the island itself, scarred by so much suffering, replaying memories like broken film reels? The Japanese soldiers who marched past Gate 3 believed, in their final breaths, that they were protecting their homeland. Perhaps their duty was too strong to die with them. The young Marine asking for a light, was he clinging to one last moment of humanity, a final comfort before death? These are not numbers in a casualty report. They were sons, husbands, fathers, and in some form, they remain. The profession of arms deals in death, no matter how we like to think of our daily military lives. That's just the reality of what's happening. In that respect, not only does it make sense that some military installations would be haunted, it should actually make us wonder how military installations aren't more haunted. Understanding Okinawan spiritual beliefs adds another layer to these phenomena. Because ancestor worship is deeply embedded in Okinawan religious life, many island locals are very superstitious. They believe that many sites on the island, built on or near ancient burial grounds or sacred sites, become prime sites for hauntings. It turns out the towers were built on the tombs of the Kamisei Shimosei clan, a family who lived on the island some 250 years prior. Before the building was constructed, the remains were excavated and the ground blessed by Shinto priests, but that apparently didn't stop a military family version of poltergeist from playing out in the apartments. Off-base, half-finished buildings are abandoned due to reports of ghostly visitors. Construction of the Royal Hotel off Route 329, near the Nakagusuku Castle ruins, was begun some 3 decades ago, possibly on a sacred site. Mysterious accidents and deaths drove workers to abandon construction. The island's spiritual landscape was forever altered by the Battle of Okinawa, creating what some researchers describe as a psychic scar across the land itself. Camp Foster is said to be the home of a ghostly samurai warrior who eternally travels from Stillwell Drive uphill toward Futenma housing. Inafuku said local city officials believe a tomb across the street from Kadena's haunted house belonged to an Okinawan samurai warrior. The house may have been built on part of that property. These samurai spirits represent a different kind of haunting. Not the trauma of recent war, but the ancient duty of warriors bound to protect their land. They serve as a reminder that Okinawa's spiritual history extends far beyond World War II, creating layers of supernatural activity that interact in complex ways. The modern military bases, built on land sacred to the Okinawan people and soaked in the blood of multiple conflicts, have become focal points where different eras of the dead converge. The ghosts of Okinawa remind us of something chilling. War does not end when treaties are signed. For some, it continues endlessly, echoing through places, replayed by souls unwilling or unable to rest. Gate 3 is proof. When the strongest soldiers in the world refuse to man a post, not out of weakness, but because the dead claimed it, how can we deny what lingers there? The base itself even leans into the idea, offering haunted tours every October, stopping at some of the most active sites. This institutional acknowledgement speaks to the pervasive nature of these experiences. They're so common, so well documented, that they've become part of the official narrative. Modern Marines and airmen continue to report encounters. Security cameras capture unexplained footage. Tour groups experience phenomena that defy rational explanation. The dead, it seems, are not ready to leave their posts. And now I ask you, what do you believe? Have you ever stood somewhere and felt the weight of history pressing against your chest? Have you ever sensed that the air itself remembered something you could not see? The documented reports from Gate 3, Building 2283, Maeda Point, and dozens of other locations across Okinawa present us with a choice. We can dismiss them as imagination, stress, or collective hysteria. Or we can acknowledge that some places hold memories so intense, so traumatic, that they leave an imprint on reality itself. Closing the gate seemed a little unnecessary since the soldier would disappear once his cigarette was lit. Yet the Marines made their choice. They abandoned a strategic position not to an enemy army, but to the ghosts of their own brothers in arms. If stories like this call to you, if you feel drawn to the places where the living and the dead overlap, then subscribe, join us. Together, we explore the shadows that refuse to fade. Remember this, some gates, once closed, are never truly abandoned. Some wars never end, and some places never forget. At Camp Hansen's Gate 3, the dead are still walking their posts. The only question is, would you dare to stand yours?